hard to believe that Metroid Dread released 1 year ago this month. Certainly one of the best games in the series, and one of my favorite games. So let's talk about it. Metroid Dread starts out with a transmission from the Federation stating that the X-Parasite has been spotted on a planet called ZDR. The Federation dispatches some robots to investigate. These robots are called Extraplanetary Multiform Mobile Identifiers, also known as EMI. Shortly after arriving, the EMIs go radio silent, so the Federation reaches out to Samus to go and investigate the situation. When Samus arrives on the surface, she takes an elevator down into the planet, and she's met with the Chozo warrior. They battle, she loses, and at the end she's stripped of all of her previous abilities. And this kind of thing is kind of a staple of the Metroid series at this point. Samus awakens to realize that she's lost her previous abilities, and she's back in her default power suit, and that's when the game changes over and you take control over Samus. I'm not going to say too much else about the story, don't want to put any spoilers in here, but anything that I just said was basically in the intro and in all the trailers, so nothing spoiled there. The music in Metroid Dread seems to take a lot of inspiration from the previous games. Some of the music is actually from the previous games, and it's kind of like a remastered version, which is kind of nice. The music in this game is pretty good. I wouldn't say it's like the best music in any video game I've ever played, but it does do the job. Each individual area has its like own music with its own vibe, and it really matches like the environment of the area. So I think they did a pretty good job there. There's a lot of intense music for boss fights, or like when you're running away from these enemies, makes it really intense and adds that tension that they really wanted to add in the game, where you're feeling that dread that you're being hunted. This is by far the smoothest Metroid game that's ever been released. The only closer one I would say would be the remake of Metroid 2, and it's actually developed by the same team, so that would make sense. Quite honestly, the fast action of Metroid Dread made it really hard to go back and play previous Metroid games. I tried to go back and play Super Metroid, but you'll notice if you play a previous Metroid game after Dread that the action is a little bit clunky, the characters move slowly. When Samus jumps, it's kind of floaty and spins around. It's just really slow altogether. It really was a product of the time though. Developers did the best they could with the hardware, but after playing Metroid Dread, it is really hard to go back and play those games. And that fast action that I mentioned before, it's so good that before you even know it, you'll be jumping around, bouncing off of walls. There's a new slide action where you can kind of like slide underneath a platform to get to like a safe space away from enemies, things like that. Totally awesome, really fast paced. One of the best platformers I've played. When Metroid Dread first launched, there wasn't really any difficulty options. You just played through as the normal difficulty, but you didn't really get to choose. You just started a new game and it just started that way. And when you complete on normal, you can unlock hard mode, which is essentially just a more difficult mode, but there wasn't really any other options. And I found it kind of funny that some reviewers were saying that it was really hard for them, and some were saying that the game was too hard. I can understand right away when you're not used to how Samus controls, it can be kind of difficult and you don't really have very powerful weapons. But once you kind of get through the game and really get acclimated with how Samus moves throughout the game, and you get different upgrades, and once you're fully maxed out, it really becomes super easy to just fly through areas of the game. Now, if I were to give Metroid Dread some criticism, I'd say it's a pretty short game. I got lost quite a bit in the game, and I still completed it in just over 14 hours, which is pretty short for a game like this, and I even 100% completed the game, so that's saying something. I did a review on another game in the same genre called Islets. I'll put the card right up here. That game took about the same amount of time to complete. That being said, Islets was an indie game developed by a single person, not a AAA game developed by a whole team of developers. But I feel like Metroid Dread really did wrap things up in the right amount of time. I feel like if the game was any shorter, it would be just way too short. If the game was any longer, I feel like it would just be adding things just to draw it out, and it just kind of feel like you're trudging through a game just to make it longer. Now, another criticism is that the game originally, like I mentioned before, didn't have any difficulty options, and a lot of reviewers were saying that the game was pretty hard. I know some people in real life that also said the game was pretty tough. Nintendo did, however, add some free DLC to Metroid Dread that added some new features, new end screen that gave you some more stats when you completed the game, a boss rush mode so you just play through all the bosses and see how far you can get before you die. The free DLC also added 2 new options for difficulty. Let's check them out right now. Alright, got Metroid Dread up on the screen right here, so I go ahead and press A to get to the save files. And you can see here I have my normal mode save where I completed the game at 100%. If I go down to the next save and I press A, it'll allow me to see the new difficulty options here. And now here's the normal mode we play as by default, and there's also a rookie mode and a hard mode. And here in rookie mode, it increases recovery from drops and reduces damage from bosses, which is really nice. It does make the game a little bit easier, but it doesn't make the game so easy that it's just boring to play through. And hard mode really just has a mode for expert players, so it's just a harder version of normal difficulty. It's probably the opposite of rookie mode, where you get less items for every enemy you defeat and just more damage from bosses. And then the last one, Dread mode, it says complete hard mode to unlock. I have not completed hard mode, obviously, but in Dread mode, you still pick up health items, but no matter what, if you get hit, you just die right on the spot. What could be harder than that, right? That's absolutely insane. I understand why they call it Dread mode. Absolutely crazy. I actually hope to check it out, see how far I get. And one could ask, Jeff, do you recommend Metroid Dread? You know, I personally really love Metroid Dread. It's one of my favorite games. It is definitely my favorite game in the Metroid series. If you check out Metacritic, it did get a score of 88 and a user score of 8.6, which is pretty high, so I would imagine that a lot of people agree with me. Now, I personally believe that Metroid Dread was worth the $60 price tag that it was originally. A lot of people argued that the game should be around $40 from what they saw the value of it was. That being said, at the time of this recording, there's a free demo for Metroid Dread with a sale for the digital version that brings the price down to $41.99. This sale only goes on until the 25th. The digital version is $41.99. The physical copy is still the regular $60 price. But if you're not like me and you don't care about getting the physical copy of the game, go ahead and download the demo. If you really like the demo, buy it for $41.99. It's a total steal. I can't recommend it enough. I'll be doing a lot more reviews for games just like this, so if you're interested in that, go ahead and click here to subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.